Okay guys, in this type of video, what we're going to go over today are types of symbiosis. So some of the things we're going to talk about are symbiosis, competition, types of them, parasitism, and commensalism. So a lot of times students in general get thrown off as to like what this word symbiosis really means. Basically, it's when two species live closely together. Doesn't necessarily mean like the proximity, like they live near each other, but more so like they just interact, right? It could be good, it could be bad. So this word symbiosis basically means they can interact. So we can kind of break it down into a couple different things or ways. Let me see. Let's do the first one. One of the ways that they can do it is animals can just compete with one another, right? Basically, there are two types that you should know about. One is called interspecific competition, and one is called intraspecific competition. Now, basically, they're the same thing. The words even sound the same. It's just basically when you have interspecific competition is when you have competition between different species, right? So let's say that I was fighting a squirrel for a sandwich, right? That'd be two different species fighting for one thing. If we had over here a lion fighting hyenas for maybe territory or fighting for water, that also would be considered interspecific competition. On the flip side, if you have intraspecific, the prefix intra means within. So basically that is when you have competition that is within the same species. So two elk fighting over a mate, two cats fighting over a treat, two dogs fighting over a ball, right? It really is fighting for any kind of resources. The main one, or the main types we usually talk about when we go through this are these three. One called mutualism. So mutualism is when both species benefit, okay? So a classic example is the clownfish here that lives in the sea anemone. The clownfish gets protection from here because this guy stings. It's actually an animal, not a plant. And the sea anemone gets the leftover scraps from whatever the clownfish eats, right? So this guy, the anemone, gets food. This guy gets protection. You have two different species both working together. Next one is one called, not working, give me 1 second. This one is called parasitism. Basically, you've probably heard of a parasite before when you take a look at a dog, right? Dogs get fleas or ticks or even mosquitoes. Those are parasites. And we kind of define that as one species benefits, the other is harmed. Specifically, this one, the one that is harmed, we call that the host. So this one right here, this is a tapeworm. Tapeworms can live in humans, so they would get the food from the host, right? So they get a food, they get shelter to live, but also that means that us humans or whatever host we're talking about is robbed of those food and nutrients, right? Therefore harming us. So that'd be parasitism. And we'll go through an example or two in just a moment. And the last one, which is kind of like in the middle, one called commensalism. Okay, commensalism is when one species benefit and the other just kind of doing its thing here, right? So a good example is a whale and these little white spots. These are called barnacles. They're basically animals with small little shells. They're filter feeders. The whale is just kind of doing its thing. It's just kind of swimming around in the ocean. It's super large. It probably does not even know these guys are here. So what does the barnacle get out of it? The barnacle gets free shelter, right? And kind of protection, right? A lot of things don't tend to eat whales because they're so large. So let's run through a couple of examples with an explanation as to why they are the way they are. Okay, if I want to go over this example right here, if I want to figure out which one of the relationships it is, if I have what's called garlic mustard and a white pine, those are both plants, it says both garlic mustard and white pines grow in the forests of New England and use the same resources from the soil. That's our key thing, the same resources. The presence of the mustard reduces the health of the white pine seedlings. So basically, this one should be competition because you are using the same resources from the soil. If we are going with this one, if I'm looking at the oxpecker and a rhino, basically the rhinoceros will, it says oxpeckers feed on the ticks that's found on the rhino. So the rhino gets cleaned of ticks. That's good because ticks are a parasite, right? So that's beneficial for the rhino. And the oxpecker, which is basically a bird, well, they get the food. So in this case, this would be an example of both that are benefiting. That one would be mutualism. A difference here is this example between a different bird and a buffalo. So it says, as buffaloes walk through the grass, insects become active and are seen and eaten by the birds. Basically, the buffalo is just walking, right? It's just going from point A to point B. As a result of walking through the field, you have all these insects that are flying around, and that's food for the birds, right? So the birds see them, they eat. So it's beneficial for the birds. This guy just doing his thing. That'd be an example of commensalism. Okay, and last one here. Pretty common example, like a mouse and a flea, right? Anyone that the host is harmed, in this case the mouse, is harmed because the flea is feeding on the mouse. That'd be an example of parasitism.